Okay, Jesus quotes scripture. Of course he does. Part 5. We are going to be in Matthew 9 and Matthew 12 at when Jesus quotes from Hosea 6. It's kind of interesting because this is the only time that Jesus quotes the same scripture twice in two different places. He quotes a scripture from Hosea. He quotes it in Matthew 9 when he's at Matthew's house at a dinner party. You know, Matthew got saved and everything, and they have this dinner party, and Jesus quotes Hosea 6 there. And then a few chapters later in Matthew 12, he repeats the same exact scripture under a different set of circumstances that we're going to look into. So it's kind of interesting that he quotes the first half of Hosea 6:6. Sort of like when he said, out of the mouths of babes got you perfected praise, but there's a second half to the verse. Well, there's a second half to the verse in Hosea 6:6 too, but he only quotes the first half of it, which is a verse that you guys I'm sure are familiar with. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So he's going to quote that in Matthew 9. He's going to quote it again in Matthew 12. When he quotes it, none of us really know for sure. Is that what he really wanted to quote, just the first half? Or did he quote the first half, insinuating the second half? Or was he pointing to the book of Hosea? You know, we don't know for sure. And I think it's a little bit of everything myself. When we look at the situation in Matthew 9 and 12, I think it's a little bit of everything, actually. Matthew 9, we are not going to spend a real lot of time in both chapters. We don't have the time, really. But Matthew 9 begins with Jesus healing the paralytic, and his healing is called into question, that he's healed this paralytic. You know, they lowered him down and all that, and there's this question about, you know, how can you forgive sins, you know, that whole thing. So it starts with the healing of a paralytic. It moves to Jesus walking by Matthew and saying, follow me, and he gets up and he does, and then Matthew has a party, a dinner party, and you would expect his dinner party is filled with other tax collectors and sinners. The story is recorded in Mark and Luke as well, but in Mark and Luke, they don't have Jesus saying, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Well, they're at this party, and there's tax collectors and sinners, and Jesus and the disciples. And the Pharisees ask the disciples, not Jesus, they ask the disciples, why? Why is Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners? I suppose you could take that a lot of different ways. I referred to the healing because here's a guy with a great healing ministry. He heals paralyzed people. Why is he wasting his time eating with these people? There's different ways of looking at why they ask why. Is it a religious thing? Is it like, is he defiling himself because he's eating with... But regardless of what the question, you gotta almost appreciate the... I don't know, I don't want to use the word stupidity, but the stupidity of it, of looking at man's greatest need is to eat food, to sleep, to drink water. There's some things that we have to do. To ask why is Jesus doing that with these sinners, the whole thing is kind of weird to me in a certain respect. But let's go ahead and read verses 12 and 13. Somebody want to read Matthew 9 verses 12 and 13. This is Jesus' answer. They're not asking him, they're asking the disciples, and Jesus is the one that brings the answer.
But when Jesus heard this, he said, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but the sinners.
So Jesus is the one that answers the question. In Luke 15, it says that the tax collectors and the sinners were all coming to Jesus. They wanted to hear what he had to say. And the Pharisees, I'm guessing a lot of the same Pharisees that were here, that asked the question, why is he eating with them? And he answers the question. But now here we are in Luke 15, tax collectors and sinners are coming, and they make the comment, once again, this man, he receives sinners and he eats with them. That right there, I know that we all know the parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. We know those. That, though, is what prompted the three parables. So let's stop and think about it. They're questioning Jesus receiving sinners and eating with them. They're still upset about this. And in the background, I'm not sure they really went away and read Hosea again. Like he said they probably should. Don't think they did. In any event, if you think of it this way, that they are taking issue with Jesus about the way he receives and eats with sinners and tax collectors, and Jesus tells them the parable of the lost sheep. And then he moves quickly. In fact, in Luke it says it's one parable, not three. It's just three parts to the same parable, which changes the way you look at it in a certain respect. He talks about the lost sheep. And then he moves very quickly into the woman who loses the coin and sweeps the whole house. And then he moves very quickly into the parable that we call the prodigal son. That's a very long answer to why does he eat with sinners? Why does he receive these tax collectors? If you think of the parables that he tells, if you think of that sheep, that's just kind of silly. It wanders off. It maybe partially curiosity, but it's just a dumb sheep. The coin. Does anybody in the room believe that the coin knew it was lost? Coins, if they fall on the floor, coins don't know they're lost. And the lost son makes a deliberate and willful, intentional decision to leave his father. What am I trying to say? What do I think Jesus was trying to say? He's saying, look at these people, these tax collectors and sinners. They're leading these silly lives. They're wandering around doing what they do. They don't even know they're lost. Some of them have made willful decisions to lead a lifestyle contrary to what they know they should be. Now what you need to do, now I've answered why I'm eating with them. They are screwed up. They are seriously messed up. So what should I be doing? Should I be having dinner with the people where we can all discuss our, high tower theologies and everything else? And should I be eating with them? Well, I do eat with them too in Matthew 12. But in Matthew 9, he's sitting there eating with these people that are hopeless. And they're all screwed up. Now, go away and learn. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Go away and learn what that means. The question is, what does Jesus, he quotes Hosea 6:6. What does that have to do with the situation that he's in? Can anybody say anything about that? He says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice at the dinner party. What do you kind of feel like he's saying? You see, because I've got this feeling that Jesus is looking around. He's looking at these people one way. The Pharisees are looking at him a different way. The Pharisees see them as losers, scumbags, going to hell and everything else. And Jesus sees the value in each and every one. He sees the value of a sheep. One sheep. Why would you go chase one sheep? Because they're valuable. Because it is one sheep. What if you were the one sheep? The one coin. It's valuable, but she's got 90%. But that one is very valuable. It completes the necklace. What about this? Well, yeah, because No, they're all valuable. The idea is value and worth. That these guys over here, all they see them is not obeying the religious system. Therefore, they're scumbags. And over here, Jesus says, quite frankly, I'm not interested in the way you look at them. You need to see the way God looks at them. You need to see that he desires mercy. And when we discover here today what that really means, I don't know what we all think about it. I'm going to share one thing. It could mean a lot of different things. And the book of Hosea. Let's move to Matthew 12. Now, this makes it interesting because the very end of Matthew 11, and I know some of you in here have this scripture memorized, come unto me, all you who labor are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's the way chapter 11 ends. It's like, come to Jesus and get some flipping relief. And get under a type of yoke, a teaching, that really is the heart of God. That's the teaching that we want. Is what does God have to say? Not what is man saying that God is saying, but what has God actually said? Because I'll tell you what, when you get that word into your weary soul, there's a refreshing. It's like a well. It's like a spring. As we get into Matthew 12, we've just come out of that call to come to Christ and rest. And now in Matthew 12, we find the boys with Jesus in a field, and they're going around picking grain and ears of corn, whatever they're eating. And it's the first 8 verses. Jesus, once again, they're going to take issue with Jesus over the activity of him and the boys, and he is going to tell them the story of David from 1 Samuel 21, not the whole story, just reminding them, and then he's going to quote Hosea 6:6 again, in a different setting, in the field this time. Read the first 8 verses in Matthew 12.
And at that time Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungered. And he began to pluck the ear of corn to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, Behold, your disciples do that which is not lawful to do.
That's kind of funny. Excuse me, but you know what's kind of funny? They go off into a field someplace, grabbing some corn, this and that. And the Pharisees, it's like they're following them around.
They must have been.
You know, exactly. You know, it doesn't say that, but what the heck do the Pharisees have to do with the boys out there in the middle of the field eating corn on the Sabbath? Or Jesus deliberately takes them. There's a bunch of Pharisees in that field over there. Let's go grab some corn. You know, I don't know. You know, it's kind of, I don't know. You know, I just read these things and I look at them and I think, that's kind of weird.
Yeah,
Matt, couldn't you give us a little bit more info there? Who's following who? You know, anyway.
that's so funny.
But they're writing the Bible, remember, so we got to keep it safe and serious. Anyway, Glory, go ahead.
But he said to them, Have you not read what David did when he hungered and they were with him? How he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the high priest. Or have you not read in the law how that the Sabbath day the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say to you that in this place is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this meant, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day.
The bottom line is this. Matthew 9, they're in a house. They're eating. Why? Because they're hungry. Matthew 12, they're out in a field. They're eating. Why? Because they're hungry. It doesn't get much more normal than this kind of thing.